have seen some features about the first category called Dravya, or the first Padartha called Dravya. Now let us gain some familiarity with the second category called Guna. Gunas are attributes, translation, and they inhere in a substance. So as I had said, the black color inheres in this particular remote. Whatever form that you see over here, like some 8 kind of a form, it inheres in this particular remote. So the gunas or attributes inhere in the substance. They are real, but they cannot exist independently of the substance. So you can imagine that some black, greens, whites, 8s, etc. shapes, rectangular forms, etc. cannot be floating around over here. They have to inhere in some Dravya. The Vaisheshika identified some 17 or so properties, but later on with their merger with the Nyaya, etc., finally 24 gunas or attributes were identified. Some of these gunas are exclusive to certain substances. So for example, Sneha resides only in water. Likewise, sound or Shabda exists only in Akasha. Cognition, which is also considered to be a quality, is there only in the Atma. Sukha, Dukkha, these are also considered as attributes or guna. They also reside only in substance. They cannot occur in other dravyas. But there are some other qualities or gunas which are common to all the substances. So for example, number or quantity, these are common to all the substances. So this particular table over here gives a quick classification of all the 24 attributes. So as you can, these attributes like color, taste, smell, etc., they occur only in finite substances. Finite substances, just to recap, are Prithvi, which is earth, water, fire, air, and also the manas. So these are the finite substances. So some of these properties reside only in this. That does not mean that they reside in all of them. If you will recollect, color is something which resides only in fire or tejas. Taste is something which resides only in water. Smell is something which resides only in earth. So what I mean to say is that they occur in these 5 finite substances. On the other hand, you have these attributes like cognition, pleasure, pain, etc., which occur only in infinite entities. Just to recap, the infinite entities are Dik, Kala, space, time, Akasha, as well as Atma. So sound, as you can see here in the last of these attributes, it resides only in the infinite substance called Akasha. In the middle, there are these attributes which inhere in both the infinite as well as in the finite substances. So number inheres both in the entities of earth, let us say Prithvi, which is a finite substance, and also in the various atmas or the infinite atmas that are there. So it is an attribute which is inherent in both places. So these are some of the details about the second category called guna. We will now move on to the third ontological category called karma. This karma resides only in finite substances like earth, water, fire, wind, as well as in the mind. And it produces effects in its own substratum as well as in other places. So for example, if I throw a ball like this, it will create some impact on this carpet, some small slight dent or something like that it will create. So it is capable of producing effect in its own substance, which is the ball, and also in other places because of some of the other causes. A unique thing about the Vaisheshika understanding of action is that action cannot produce further action. So it has listed certain causes of action. Only those can produce action. Action itself cannot produce further action. And the other, which is somewhat very close to say, or reminds one, let us say, of the Newton's third law of motion, is that action is opposed to its effect. So if I throw a ball, gradually it will go and stop. So this they conceptualized as being opposed to its effect. So the motion of a particular thing, which is the effect that my throwing has on it, gradually acts in such a way that the motion is stopped. Very similar to it reminds us, for every action there is a reaction, this kind of a statement, it reminds us of that. But I am not trying to claim that they proposed the third law of motion, but it just reminds us or makes us triggers the memory of the third law of motion. So they tried to classify the various types of action or motion that is there, and they came up with these 5 subcategories: upward motion, which is utkshepanam; downward motion, which is apakshepanam; contraction, which is akunchanam; expansion, which is prasaranam; and motion of any other kind like rotation or some perturbation, etc. These kinds of motions, they gave a general name called gamanam. So these were the various types of action. So any action which results in an object making contact with an upper region, they called upward motion. So this was their simple definition of upward motion. Similarly, any action which caused the entity to be in contact with lower regions was called downward motion. So this was some simple definition of motion that they tried to give. And another unique thing about this karma is that different types of actions or motion were attributed to different causes. So they did not say that all action has only one cause or something like that. So gravity was gurutva, which I have translated as gravity, but it is better to just understand it as gurutva. Gurutva is the cause of some kind of motion. Here prayatna or my own effort is a cause of some other kind of motion. Fluidity is the cause of motion of liquids. In water, the motion is caused by fluidity. Similarly, the motion between atoms, when the universe was created, it was created by putting the atoms together. Now a question arises: who caused the motion between the atoms? One of the answer is that it is adrishta, it is unperceivable. So they also gave adrishta, this unperceivable causes, as the cause of the action between a let us say a metallic needle and the magnet. So today we know that there is some magnetic force, etc., some electromagnetic force, etc., but at that time it was attributed to this cause called adrishta. So these are the various causes that they proposed to explain various types of action. So now some of you may think that this does not seem very scientific. How can there be different forces for different or different causes for different motion? So today also in physics we have different forces to explain different phenomena. So today there are 4 types of forces: gravitational forces, electromagnetic forces, strong nuclear forces, and weak nuclear forces. So whatever the motion between planets and even any object with mass, etc., is attributed to the gravitational force. The motion of charged particles, or the force between charged particles and its resultant motion, is explained via electromagnetic force. The force which keeps the nucleus of an atom together is the strong nuclear force. Likewise, the force which causes the decay of radioactive particles, etc., is called weak nuclear force. So in modern physics also you have different forces to explain the motion. Of course there is a lot more generality over here. The Vaisheshika had many more causes to explain the different types of causes. So the one thing which we will try to spend a little more time is this gurutva, or what we have translated as gravity, because it is interesting to note that they have observed that this heaviness, gurutva literally means heaviness, is the cause of some sort of motion. There are some sutras in the Vaisheshika Sutra which are very interesting to observe. For example, take the first sutra. Upward motion is caused by a combination of effort as well as gurutva. Take the first sutra for example. Upward motion is caused by the combination of effort as well as gurutva. So my effort is required to throw this thing up, isn't it? And if it had absolutely no mass in it, let us say, it would not go up. You can always take a feather instead of this remote. You can take a feather. It will require much more effort to throw a feather up to the same extent as throwing a remote up, because what a Vaisheshika would say is that this has more gurutva in it compared to the feather. Today we understand gravity as a force which is there between entities which have mass, whereas for the Vaisheshika this gurutva was a property which is there in the dravya, in the substance. So that is one very important distinction that we must keep in mind. Take the second sutra. In the absence of conjunction, objects fall due to gravity. So this seems very agreeable even on modern standards in the absence of any conjunction, in the sense that if this dravya were not in conjunction with my hand, it would fall. Why would it fall? It would fall because it has some property called gurutva. Sanyoga bhave gurutvat patanam. So sanyoga is the contact between my palm and this remote. If it were not there, because of the gurutva that is there inside this, which is inherent inside this, it would fall. So this is another sutra which seems very intuitive even by modern standards. The last one which I would like to present is that in the absence of some impetus, let us say some sort of counter force or something like that, objects fall due to gurutva. Samskara bhave gurutvat patanam. So what it is telling is that then the question, somebody may ask some question that the trees are not standing by some, I am not holding the tree together or something like that. The Vaisheshika would say that no, there is some sort of an imputa, some sort of a samskara in that, because of which it is not falling. So all of these are very much agreeable even by modern physics standards. So unless there is a counteracting force, the object will fall, which is what you can understand in this last sutra as. So the important distinction, though it seems agreeable, is that unlike the modern force of gravity, gurutva is an attribute which is there in a dravya. I would also like to present a few sutras which demonstrate that the Vaisheshika tried to also have certain laws of motion. In their own way, they had certain laws of motion. So take the first sutra here, for example. It says that when there is no particular molecular movement or impulse, in this case the word nodana has been translated as molecular movement or impulse, there is no upward movement or sideways movement. Na urdhva na tiryak gamanam. So this is the translation. So this is very, very close to the first law of motion. When there is no force or impulse, there is no motion. There is neither upward motion or sideways motion. It comes very close to the first law of motion, which says that unless there is an external force, a body at rest will continue to remain at rest, or in motion it will continue to remain at motion. So somewhat very close to the first. The second, which I have already hinted at in the beginning, karya virodhi karma. So the effect of action works against the action. So what it means is that perpetual motion is not possible. So if you give some momentum to something or impetus to something, in time it will exhaust and it will come to a stop. There is a hint of the third law that for some action there is always some or the other counteracting force, because of which you cannot have perpetual motion. So in this way they had their own laws of motion. That also you can say. So these are some of the contributions that the Vaisheshika has made to, let us say, physics or kinematics, let us say. It has made some contributions to it.